Last week, I gave you a pick that tripled your money, and I gave you another one that almost quadrupled your money. If you happen to parlay the two of them together, you got back more like 20 times your money. If you haven't yet subscribed or liked, now's the time to do so. Let's run the intro and I'll get into it in more detail. My name is Percy, and welcome to the 4Bs, where we discuss boxing, betting the B-side, and other BS. If you haven't already, like and subscribe, and don't miss any of the other picks for the upcoming fights. Last week I gave you 3 picks. One of them didn't work out, but we're going to focus on the 2 that did. Let's first talk about the Vergil Ortiz versus Serhii Bohachuk fight. If you were listening to the fight commentary, you had Gabe Rosado say at the very front, I don't think we're going to need scorecards because I don't see this going to the final bell. And that was the overwhelming sentiment going into this fight. 2 knockout artists, one was going to knock out the other. That was the way it was going to go down. But I told you last week, or last Saturday, I didn't see it that way. Vergil Ortiz didn't really have that experience at super middleweight against true super middleweights, and really only had 2 rounds of experience in the past 2 years. Serhii Bohachuk, even though he was Ortiz's sparring partner at one point, is a true super middleweight. He's been fighting at 154 for most of his career, and I didn't think that Ortiz was going to be able to just walk through him the way he'd been able to walk through other people at lower weights. When we watch this fight, Ortiz comes out, he gets knocked down in the first round, and it was until the 5th round, I believe, when they had to do a review and rule it a knockdown, because originally it was ruled a slip. And that, of course, changed the tone of the fight. Ortiz started getting anxious and trying to press and attack, and actually, I don't think that was really the best thing for him. He ended up getting knocked down again, and his corner had to tell him, rightly so, to stay calm and to stick to the plan, to basically outbox Bohachuk, which is what he is able to do. Eventually, he did get a very slim decision to make us the winner on a plus 380 bet. Now, in the other main event, you had Angelo Leo versus Luis Alberto Lopez, and Lopez is a guy who's far more well-known. He's exciting to watch. He fights with his hands down and his chin out and winging shots from all different angles and everything like that. But with a guy like that, it's also just a matter of time before you get clipped on the chin, like he did in this fight, and you end up losing. So at plus 330 for this one, I thought it was the right time to go ahead and pick somebody who was going to face him. Angelo Leo came in, continuing with the body attack that he normally does, and was able to catch Alberto Lopez with a hook that landed straight on his chin, and you could have counted to like 30, and I don't think he was going to get up. I don't even know why the ref started the count. You knew he wasn't going to get up. He had no idea where he was. Clear knockout victory there. If you put the 2 of them together into a parlay like I did, you got yourself a plus 1964 return, which means that if you bet $10, you would have won $196.40, and if you bet $100, you would have won $1,964. You don't always win when you make these kinds of bets, but it sure feels good when you do. And when I told you, like, the thing that I want to be able to deliver to you guys who are listening and watching is have something that gets you to enjoy boxing the way that I do, to really, really get into it. That's what these plus money odds bets are for. They give you something to root for. They give you something to watch intently for and to really get into the action. As plus money odds, more often than not, they're not going to hit, right? That's just the way they work. But I give you plausible ones that have a real chance to hit, and when they do, it's going to feel really good, like today. Before I get into the rest of the recaps, I'd like to hear from you, so leave a comment below. Which fight did you enjoy the most from Saturday night? And on the undercard, was there a prospect who you really were impressed by and you'd like to see more of? I'm going to get into my thoughts on that in a little bit. The only other bet that I put in was on Cornejo to beat Braekhus. In that fight, she was a slight underdog. Braekhus has been looking old, so I didn't really think that Braekhus was going to be able to show much of anything. I really don't think she did. I think the announcers were kind of hyping it up and talking like as if she was looking great, but she really wasn't. This was a pretty boring fight, especially by women's standards. When they only fight 2 minutes a round, it's usually all action. And this was Braekhus following Cornejo around the ring. They would throw punches, but there was nothing really significant happening. And she was able to get a knockdown that, the announcers were saying it didn't look like it was a knockdown, but then the replay they showed didn't tell you either. It was scored a knockdown, it stayed a knockdown, and she ended up winning on all 3 cards by 3 points, so the knockdown probably mattered. Maybe it would have just been a little bit closer, but it could have changed the way she fought the fight too. Going back to Serhii Bohachuk and Vergil Ortiz fight, though, I wanted to show you the prop bets that I did go with that almost came through. Just so you know, like, about the process, about how I am when I pick these fights out. What I'm really looking to do is take all the information that I've gathered about a fight, and now this includes things like looking on BoxRec at the records, the weight classes they fought at, who they fought, how they did in those fights, but also looking at past fights and watching the video over again to see if there's anything I see in there that give a clue as to how things will go in this upcoming fight. Definitely want to see the weigh-in if I can, to see how they look, if they look like they're too dehydrated, and it might affect the way they perform in the night of the fight, and read up on different things that I can. Now, I do this so that I can make a more reasonable and sound bet. And I do this so you don't have to do that too. Because then you're talking about hours and hours that you're putting into trying to research this instead of enjoying the fight and watching the outcome and everything like that. So that's why I do it for you. If that's something that helps you, definitely hit like and subscribe. So when I was looking at this Bohachuk fight, one thing that stood out to me that I kept on coming back to was that Vergil Ortiz has only had 2 rounds of experience in the past 2 years. When you compare that to Bohachuk, who's been fighting at 154 this whole time, I think he's had 5 fights in the past 2 years and gone multiple rounds. So in my head, I'm thinking, all right, Ortiz is the more skilled fighter, but he's also the naturally smaller fighter. And he might come out and be susceptible to an early knockdown. If he is susceptible to an early knockdown, he would also, in turn, probably want to try and knock down Bohachuk to get even with him on that. And so in the first round, you see him get knocked down, and I'm like, oh, great, I'm on track here. I put in 2 prop bets. Both of them were plus 3,000 or plus 3,600. I forget which one was which. The first was for both fighters to be knocked down somewhere between rounds 1 and 6. And then the other was for both fighters to be knocked down anytime during the fight, but Vergil Ortiz to win. And if you were watching the fight, we were really, really close with this one on both counts, because Ortiz did come back with a fury against Bohachuk. He did try to knock him down and knock him out. And there were many times where Bohachuk looked like he was going to succumb to that and was maybe just like an extra punch or two away from being nudged down to the mat. That seemed like what was happening. And so it was very exciting to follow. Yeah, the bet didn't pan out, but if you had that bet and you can imagine what it's like to get that bet in, yeah, it makes the entertainment factor that much more for that fight. Now turning to the rest of the card, just as an overall recap, here's some things that I want to say. If we're talking about the biggest winner of the night, I'd say first off, the biggest winner was us. If you put money down on it and you did get almost plus 2,000 on a parlay for those 2 fights, then congratulations. That's something that felt great, I'm sure. And what that basically means is, if we oversimplify this, you could make 20 similar bets and get them all wrong and you still break out even, right? The hope would be that over those 20 bets, instead of getting them all wrong, you get 2 or 3 of them right, and then you're even further ahead. So that's kind of like the way we're doing this, winning those things, and you're not trying to make a living off of this. This is just something to make the boxing matches that much more entertaining, which this past weekend definitely did, even though we were really winners overall with boxing and the different bouts that we saw this weekend and the past weekend. It's been a great couple of weekends for boxing overall. But I would say if we're talking about a fighter who is possibly the greatest winner out of this entire weekend, it's probably Terence Crawford. He lost out on Canelo, which is bad, I'm sure. That's a lot of money there. But now he has Vergil Ortiz in front of him. He has another name in front of him, and this time it's somebody who does not have the size advantage over him, does not have the skill advantage over him. And I know there are a lot of people who love Vergil Ortiz with good reason, but he is not more skilled than Terence Crawford. And the version of Vergil Ortiz that came to fight Serhii Bohachuk would be easy work for Terence Crawford. He's a big name, and he's somebody that will generate a lot of money for the both of them. And who knows, maybe, possibly, a Canelo fight could still be in the works down the line if he does what I think he can do to Vergil Ortiz. If we're talking about the biggest loser, it would have to be Luis Alberto Lopez, who could have been asleep for a good minute or 2 on the floor if nobody disturbed him. He's an exciting fighter, so I don't really want to see too many changes, but I think the way that he lost this time around dictates that he needs to make some changes. He needs to definitely protect himself at least a little bit better for his own sake. At least keep a hand up at the chin, one of them. If we're talking about prospects to watch, I think the guy we're looking at is Albert Chop Chop Gonzalez. He's fought for the second time in less than a month. Here he is back again, and I gotta say, he looked even better this time than he did last time. A month's worth of work, he's improving. He made quick work of a guy who Chris Algieri had noted is a tough competitor, and he'd never seen this guy look this bad against other people before, so it's a feather in the cap of Chop Chop. Definitely want to see more of him in the future. Let's quickly recap the rest of the card from ESPN in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In the first fight, we saw a wild card boxer named Arnold Khegai, a featherweight at 126 pounds, facing off against an opponent in Belmar Preciado from Colombia. Now, Preciado came into this wanting to prove that he deserves more shots, and he fought really hard in the beginning, but Khegai, he is definitely workmanlike, he's methodical, and he's disciplined. All those things worked in his favor to break down Preciado to the point where when he was asked if he wanted to continue, he said no. Do I think that Khegai is going to be someone you're looking at and eventually is a pound-for-pound guy? No. Can he be a lot of trouble for other featherweights, especially if they don't come prepared? Yes. So I do think that he can legitimately look at possibly being a champion at one point in his career. And especially when you know that out of the wild card gym, you're going to come out well prepared offensively, he should be one to watch. The next fight was also a stablemate of his. It was Steven Navarro, who came in at 2-0 with 1 KO, versus Israel Camacho, who also had 2 wins, but has 11 losses. Now, Navarro has fought all 3 of his fights as 6-rounders, which tells you a little bit about how much they believe in him, that he's already bypassing 4-round fights. The note about Israel Camacho that was kind of strange is that he was mentioned to have come to the arena and into Albuquerque alone. No corner, no coach, nothing. Which I don't know. I haven't heard of it, but it wasn't the only time we heard of it this night. He suffered a knockdown via body blow where Navarro celebrated, thought that for sure this fight was over, and he actually got up. Camacho got up and probably should have stayed down because he took an even more vicious body shot that had him laying out flat on his stomach on the floor, and you knew he wasn't going to get up. Navarro ends up with his 3rd victory and the 2nd by knockout. In the 3rd fight, we had Alan Kid Kansas Garcia, who we've seen before on the ESPN cards, versus Maickol Lopez Villagrama, who was 16-5 with 8 KOs. Garcia is coached by Gloria Alvarado. It seems like he takes instruction pretty well. It seems like her instructions are very aggressive. Even when Garcia does knock his opponent down, she's telling him more of the same. Keep doing what you're doing. The only thing that he didn't seem to do that she was instructing him to do was to use his jab. We'd like to see more of that, but he's definitely a prospect to keep an eye on. Then we went over and had the Chop Chop fight against Damian Alcala, and this one was nothing but positives for Chop Chop in this fight. Definitely want to see more of him. I don't know who he's scheduled to fight next, but tune in. He's rising very fast. After that, we had the former Top Rank protege, now returned and re-signed to Top Rank, Vito Mielnicki at junior middleweight weight class of 154 pounds. And he looked really good. At one point, I actually put down, he dropped his opponent in the 2nd round. Could this be the KO of the night? Turns out it wasn't, but not through any fault of his own. I mean, there were plenty of great KOs on this night. And I did say what I saw from here is he looked like a guy originally when he was signed to just be a big-name opponent for someone like Xander Zayas. But what I saw here makes him look like more than that. Like, this fight could be a legitimate test for Zayas, and one that Mielnicki, if he plays his cards right, could actually win. Now, I'm a big Xander Zayas fan, but I am looking forward to seeing this fight, and I know it's going to happen here in New York, so why not? Let's see it as soon as we can. Then there was a fight between Matthew Griego, who's an Albuquerque, New Mexico native. He was originally supposed to fight another fighter who actually ended up hospitalized. He was found like unconscious in his pool or something like that. I forget his name, but they brought in a fighter who Griego has fought before, named Gilberto Mendoza, who was 23-18 with 4 draws and 11 KOs. This was the second of the 2 fighters who showed up to New Mexico with nobody, no trainer, no corner, nothing like that. which I thought was odd, but I guess maybe that's what happens when you have a late replacement and you have someone who's familiar with the fighter he's fighting and just figured, why not? Let's go ahead and run it back, right? I won't say anything too much about this fight because it kind of was losing my interest as I was watching the DAZN card. Griego apparently hurt his hand in the second round and fought through it, but managed to get himself a decision. I don't know that I need to see much more of Griego, but we'll see what he looks like if they put him back on another card. Maybe it was just like a thing because he's a local fighter and they wanted to shine some light on him. I didn't really see anything that was all that great for me to continue on with there. Another fight that came up, this is the co-main event. This is one that I was really thinking about, man, the line here looks like someone you could bet the B-side on here. I think he was like a plus 370 or something like that, underdog, or maybe even more. Bryan Flores, Lindolfo Delgado, both of whom are junior welterweights at 140 pounds from Mexico and also undefeated. If you didn't get to see this fight, even though the bet on the B-side would not have turned out in our favor, like I said, you're looking for things that give you something to root for. He ended up losing a split decision. He was clearly in it, and you could make the case that he actually won the fight. Turning over to the Golden Boy and DAZN card, I didn't watch this all that intently because I was kind of split between two screens until it was Ortiz versus Bohachuk. I did catch the Braekhus versus Cornejo fight. Wasn't too impressed with it. That was the last one of the fights that was on free on YouTube. We also had a fight between Kenneth Sims Jr. and Jonathan Momo Romero. Now the thing about this is this fight was fought at super lightweight, but Romero is like a bantamweight. That's where he had a title many years ago and lost it in his first defense. So this was a situation where a 37-year-old former champion took on a fight at a bulked up weight, and what you would expect would happen happened. He ended up having to retire. I don't know what you really want to take away from this for Kenneth Sims. He got the win, but he was expected to. This was the way it was supposed to happen, and it did. So there you have it. The stars are aligning for some pretty good fights. On the pay-per-view level, we're going to have ourselves Terence Crawford versus Vergil Ortiz, and on the ESPN TV card, probably a Vito Mielnicki versus Xander Zayas, which should be an exciting fight to watch. Next weekend, we have Christian and Billy versus Sergey Derevchenko, so I'll definitely come back with that. But one thing to note on that undercard, someone you definitely do not want to miss is Abdullah Mason. He will be on there. Do not miss him. That kid is incredible. I'll see you again later this week. To make sure of that, just make sure you hit the like and subscribe, and tell a friend. I mean, who wouldn't want to have part of a plus 1964 parlay?